you grew up? Who did you want to be? Was there someone you idolized, someone that you said, wow, that's, when I grow up, I want to be just like him, or just like her? Was it an astronaut? Was it an athlete? Was it an author? Who was it for you?
David Hasselhoff.
David Hasselhoff. Fantastic. Fantastic. Very good. When I was a kid, I didn't know who I wanted to be or what I wanted to do. I just knew who I didn't want to be. And that was my parents. Now, let me explain why. I have lived in 40 different places throughout my life. Wow. My parents were not in the military. We were never homeless. They just couldn't figure out where to be. When I was in 5th grade, we moved into what would end up being the last house I lived in with both my parents together. By 9th grade, they had separated for the 21st time. Wow. I was the only kid I knew that had a to-go bag in the back of his closet. Oh, wow. So when my mom said, it's time to go, I would just go grab the bag and let's go. And off to grandma's we went. 7 days later, my mom would say, let's go. And I was like, all right, I grabbed my bag and back to the house we went. 21 times they separated, the last time was it. I thought that it was a little unstable when I was growing up, but it was nothing like what happened after they split. I spent the first 2 years after my parents split with my mother. I was 14. How many of you at 14 were really responsible? Exactly. I forgot to do the laundry. I was 14 years old. My mom came home and said, I think it's time you go live with your father, if this is the kind of kid you're going to be. Oh. So I grabbed my to-go bag and off I went. Went to live with my dad. And 2 years later, my dad said, I think you're cramping my lifestyle. I think you should go live somewhere else. Wow. Well, this presented a problem because mom wasn't an option. Dad was no longer an option. So I spent my senior year in high school living in a fraternity house at the University of Pittsburgh.
Wow. Nice.
Exactly. I lived on Jeff Reed's floor for my senior year in high school, the Delta house at the University of Pittsburgh. Now, I've been this height since I was 12. I blended in. It wasn't like I looked like a high school kid. I looked like a college kid. That was the best senior year anybody could have. But it was during that time that I started to make a conscious decision. I started to look at my life and say, okay, this isn't kind of what I want to be. This isn't the kind of vagabond lifestyle that I want. I know I'm eclectic, but I want to have some sort of consistency in my life. And I started to think about what that meant. So I started making a list, beginning of my senior year of high school, of all the things that I didn't want to be. And when I picked it up, I looked and I said, wow, I just described my parents. And I started thinking back, have I been on this path before? And I realized there was one moment in my childhood that really defined me separating from my parents. It happened in 1979. 1979. We were having dinner and there was a story that came on the news in the other room. And the newscaster led off, have you ever felt like you've been ripped off? Oh, yeah, I have. That's interesting. And my dad walked into the room and stood in front of the TV, and it was the announcement that the Sex Pistols had broken up. Anybody hear of the Sex Pistols before? Mm-hmm. Well, my father was furious that even made the news. I can't believe they would put that junk on the news. Can't believe it. And I said, oh, he hates it. I must find out what that is. So off I went, and I realized at that point, that was when I found alternative music.